Hey guys, it's me, Professor Star. So, have y'all watched Thomas the Tank Engine before? Well, of course you have, because Thomas the Tank Engine is pretty popular. And guess what? It's about trains, just like today's topic, rolling stock. So, let's get started. So, what is Rolling Stock? Well, it's an indie animated show based in Normanton and Warwick Railway that, from what I can infer, is based on Thomas the Tank Engine because, trains. Also, it was entirely written, animated, and voiced by this guy named MST, who I assume is the owner of the channel, Australia Animations, the channel where this series comes from. So, good job, MST. Oh, by the way, the part where I said that the entire show is voiced by MST, it's basically just like the entire first part of the show. The last part, which is like, episode 8, it's like, has other voice actors in it. So first, let's talk about our main cast. Oh, and by the way, if I sound weird during this part, it's because, I got my expander in recently. I mean, not recently, I don't know, by the time of recording 2 days ago, so, yeah, forgive me if I sound weird. Anyway, there's OS, Thomas of this series. Apparently he's a steam engine, which is why he looks different than the other trains. I'm not sure why, but I kind of related to him. I don't know why. Anyway, there's also Electra. She's pretty hardworking, I guess, but then again, so are the other engines. There's also Sparrow, and he's apparently made of, newer technology, which apparently is why he's, more proud, I suppose. Is that the right word? Well, anyway, I'd say he's kind of like Gordon from Thomas and Friends to make things simpler. Then there's Rudolph, who hates the rain. Yeah, that's going to be important later, so remember that. Also, he's pretty grumpy in general. And there's also Trixie, who I don't exactly care about much. She likes playing tricks on the other engines, hence the name. And her job is to prepare coaches and trains for the other locomotives to carry. And lastly, there's Beatrice, who helps out when, trees fall into the railway and stuff. Oh, and I almost forgot about Stacy, and she's basically Sir Topham Hatt if he was a girl, and if he didn't say confusion and delay all the time. Now, let's talk about the pilot episode. It's pretty straightforward, so here's how it goes. So, OS gets the task to carry Farmer Brown's produce to the market. However, here's the thing. Farmer Mrs. Brown, who by the way is Stacy's sister, is horrendous because she apparently complains all the time. Some might even call her a Karen. Anyway, the other engines warn OS about Mrs. Brown's horrendousness, and OS over here is all like, how bad can it be? Well, guess what? It will be bad. So, next morning, OS goes to carry Farmer Brown's produce. However, since she is a horrendous lady, the whole trip was terrible. That was until there was a tree on the tracks and OS had to stop. However, Mrs. Brown wants OS to push the tree off the tracks, even though he is a train. At this point, OS had enough. However, instead of blowing up on her, he calmed down. While I now understand why he did that, I'm still a little upset that, I'm still a little upset that Mrs. Brown never really got reprimanded for, I don't know, being horrendous. Anyway, OS explains that he can't push the train off the tracks because he's a train. Oh my gosh, did I say, I meant OS can't push the tree off the tracks because he's a train. Anyway, eventually, Beatrice arrives and removes the tree from the tracks, and Mrs. Brown gets her produce to the market on time. Yippee! So, time for the next episode, and whoa, what is happening? Why is the screen glitching? Oh, Fritz, it's you. Wait, why are you here?
I wanted to collab, so I'm here.
Oh, okay, understandable.
So, what are we talking about?
We are talking about Rolling Stock. I've just finished reviewing the first episode and pretty much the main cast, so I guess you can explain episodes 2, 4, 6, and 8 if that's alright.
Okay. So in episode 2, Sparrows introduced the series, and apparently Mainline lent its Sparrow to the Normantation in Warwick Railway to help out with the extra work with the farmers. Stacy offers OS to help Sparrow get used to himself, Sparrow decides to work with Electra for the day. After looking at the other engines, disapproving at the shunting yards, and Sparrow and Electra collect their first trains for the day. But not without Sparrow looking at the shunting yards and Trixie disapproving. But then he complains that he wants to carry his passenger coaches instead of the farming goods. However, he reluctantly carries the trains he's not supposed to carry. He's supposed to carry alongside Electra. But since Sparrow was so stuck up, he went on in the front of the train. Then, even though Electra wanted to be in front so she can guide Sparrow like she was supposed to, and so they both pulled out onto the branch line. However, Sparrow kept complaining. However, later on in their journey, Sparrow kept going even though he went past a signal that was set to danger. So Electrix tried to stop him by applying her brakes, but Sparrow was going too fast for them to work. And then that caused the cupping in between him and Electra to break. And then, since he was going so fast, he practically flew off the rails and crashed near Farmer Brown's farm. Unfortunately, Electra had to leave them behind because she had to, do her job. And for the rest of the day, Sparrow did nothing but watched the other trains pass. But eventually, Beatrice arrived to carry Sparrow back on the track, and then at the end of the day, Sparrow was sent back to the main line.
Well, that sure was something. Anyway, time for episode 3. Basically what happens is that Electra's motors are having issues, causing her to be more inefficient to the main line, and since her new motors would arrive late, Electra would have to keep working with her current ones, and because of that, she was only limited to passenger duties. This kind of made passengers upset because, since Electra's motors are more inefficient, causing her to go slower. This pressured Electra to pretty much overwork herself until her motors completely wore out, and at the end of the episode, Electra's new motors finally came in, and shockingly, Sparrow's generator breaks. We also learn in this episode that cars and trucks are sentient too, which is cool, I guess.
So in episode 4, since it was extremely hot that day, OS wasn't able to work for a while, so Sparrow came to basically take his place. Apparently, Sparrow was popular among the passengers because his coaches had air conditioning. Because of this, he kept lowering the temperature to make the passengers more happy, causing him to have to use a lot of power. During all of that, Rudolph kept complaining about the heat and how Sparrow was using too much power. Eventually, he stopped in the middle of the branch line because he ran out of electricity. Meanwhile, Beatrice went to help Sparrow by bringing him a water tank. However, the water tank was empty because Sparrow used it for his air conditioning. OS offers Beatrice to bring his tender instead, since he wasn't working for a while. So Beatrice took the tender to Sparrow and pulled him to the next station, with Rudolph ready to pull Sparrow's coach. And at the end of the episode, Beatrice looks up in the sky and says, "It's going to rain," which leads to our next episode,
which is episode 5. In episode 5, as stated before, it rains, so it's finally not hot anymore. However, that's bad because Rudolph hates the rain. Also, side note, when it rains, the engines basically have to carry only half the amount of trains they can carry to make it easier to go uphill, since the rain would make the rails slippery, which is kind of why Rudolph hates the rain, because he likes pulling long freight trains. Anyway, one morning, Stacy says that heavy rain and strong winds were coming, meaning that it would be harder for the trains to do their jobs. That afternoon, the storm finally came, and Electra was collecting her passengers as usual. Unfortunately, that storm had lightning in it, and the lightning caused a tree to fall onto the railway, so Electra stopped before she could run into it. Meanwhile, Rudolph saw OS looking pretty sad. Apparently, one of his side rods came off, and he had to carry a goods train to Warwick Junction, but he can't, and Beatrice and Trixie were busy removing fallen trees from the railway, so Rudolph offers OS to carry his trains for him, while he comes alongside him to carry the goods. However, they came across a hill, and, as stated before, the rain would make the rain slippery and hard to go up. It took a while, but Rudolph refused to give up, and they finally made it up the hill, and they actually made it to their destination on time.
In episode 6, OS is tasked to run the Grand Scarlet Flyer, which is a very old express train that usually went very fast. However, it got outdated and people didn't use it anymore. But now it's been restored, so after restoring them, started pulling the Grand Scarlet Flyer to Warwick Junction. All the passengers were pretty excited to see them. Apparently, OS realizes that the Grand Scarlet Flyer was only going to be used for tourism, and he was upset about it. That wasn't what it was used for back in the day. That was when he got the idea to go really fast, just like the old days. It caused the other engines to clear the line for OS and the Grand Scarlet Flyer. However, by the time he got to the next station, nobody was there. OS went so fast. What was worse is that Stacy came and told him he was supposed to get there by noon, because the passengers were supposed to have a tea party at a hotel of some sort at that time. But since OS arrived early, they would have to wait for an hour with nothing to do. Stacy also told OS that he can do better at the dining special later that day, and so he did. And since apparently it got good reviews, OS now had the job of pulling Grand Scarlet Flyer on special occasions.
Now it's time for episode 7. In episode 7, Rudolph arrives to the shunting yards late because of issues with loading cattle. He runs into Trixie by accident, and Trixie and Rudolph talk when that happens. And during that talk, Rudolph calls Trixie Little Trixie and then goes to refuel since he didn't have time to do that morning. And yeah, that offends Trixie, and it gives her the opportunity to prank him to get back at him. Basically, the idea was to give Rudolph old rusty freight trains that were hard for him to carry and may or may not nearly start a fire. Meanwhile, Rudolph complains to OS that his whole schedule is messed up thanks to the cattle, and OS offers to carry Rudolph's next trains if he agrees to carry OS's log deliveries. While that was happening, Trixie was waiting for Rudolph to come and take her the old rusty freight trains, not knowing that it would be OS carrying them instead. However, before OS could come, Trixie was called to the workshops since OS, oh my gosh, I forgot how to talk. Anyway, once OS arrived at the shunting yards, he connected himself to Rudolph's goods train, not knowing about the rusty old freight trains connected to it, and eventually, OS reaches Farmer Brown's farm, where the goods train was supposed to be delivered. Farmer Brown complains about OS being late and loads her goods in the train. Keep in mind that this train was a rusty old freight train that may or may not nearly start a fire. Foreshadowing. Ooh. Anyway, Trixie was done at the workshop and was back at the shunting yards. She notices Rudolph, who wasn't carrying the rusty old freight trains. I wonder why. Anyway, Rudolph explains that OS offered to carry his next train, and that really shocked Trixie because that was not the plan. Meanwhile, OS was getting tired of carrying the freight trains because they were hard to carry, especially now with Farmer Brown's goods in them. Eventually, OS's fireman notices that the old freight trains had smoke rising from their wheels because they were so old and calls Beatrice for help. See, guys? I told you that it would nearly start a fire. Anyway, Trixie tells Rudolph to follow Beatrice with some vans, and so he does. OS gets interrogated about the whole thing by the fire department, and Farmer Brown... Hold on, I lost my spot on my script. Anyways, Farmer Brown arrives at the scene complaining about now the strawberries were going to be ruined. It took a while to solve the problem, but eventually it was solved. As punishment, Trixie had to use her train wheels instead of her tractor wheels, which would make it longer and harder to prepare trains. And at the end of the episode, Rudolph apologizes to Trixie for calling her little and offers to help her, so yay! Good ending! Okay, so I know I said that that Fritz would be explaining episodes 4, 6, wait, hold up, 2, 4, 6, and 8, but apparently Fritz isn't able to record for episode 8 and the final thoughts section, so I'm just gonna read that for him. So yeah. Anyway, finally it's time for episode 8, the longest episode in the series and the one with the best quality. Apparently there was this spring carnival going on, and the locomotives had to help with delivering rides and attractions to the carnival. To help with preparations, Sparrow comes back since a storm was going to come later that day. The day went normally until that evening when the storm started, and since it's evening, the locomotives were all back at the sheds. However, Sparrow is called to deliver something, but Sparrow doesn't want to do it, probably because of the storm. So, Rudolph goes to do it instead. Meanwhile, the locomotives decide to tell each other scary stories. Otis goes and tells his story. It was about this beautiful and self-centered steam engine named Fa Bala. Weird name, I know. One day, Fa Bala was delivering a goods train in the rain, and she hated the rain. She whistled and spoke rudely at the rain to try and make it stop, but it only rained harder. Suddenly, she somehow went off the rails, so her crew had to get some help. She kept talking to the rain rudely, but of course it didn't work and it rained harder. However, when her crew came back, Fa Bella shrunk into a tiny toy train. But she was so caught up with their argument in the rain, she didn't realize that she was shrinking, and the rain made her smaller and smaller until she was no more. And that's the end of OS's scary story. Sparrow thought that OS's story wasn't scary and went to sleep. The next morning, the rain stopped, and Rudolph didn't return. Stacy arrived and told everyone to be careful at the overpass bridge, and Sparrow was called to pull Rudolph's train since he hadn't arrived back at the sheds yet. When Sparrow arrived at the overpass bridge, he saw a lorry with its tarp not fixed down properly, eventually causing it to come off. And what was under that tarp, you may ask? It was a mini version of Rudolph, just like OS's scary story. Oh my gosh! This shocked Sparrow, and he stopped to try and see the lorry again, but it was already out of sight. Meanwhile, Electra was at the carnival, and Sparrow came and told her about what he saw. But then he noticed that the mini Rudolph was being used as a carnival ride. This shocked Sparrow even more, until Rudolph, somehow completely fine, arrived. This confused Sparrow, and Stacy told him that the mini Rudolph isn't actually Rudolph, and it was actually just a miniature engine for the carnival. Sparrow was then upset because he was basically tricked into thinking that the rain shrunk Rudolph and that his corpse was being used as a carnival ride. In the end, the carnival was a success, and Sparrow thought that the idea of a mini Rudolph carnival ride was silly. And that's basically the end of the series. Wow, that sure was something. Anyway, it's time for final thoughts. I'll start. So, personally, I think the series is alright, I guess. It's pretty obvious that the series was inspired by Thomas and Friends because uh you know, trains. But for some reason, I kind of found this series fun to watch, especially the last episode. However, I did kind of feel like I did kind of find it a little unsettling. Is that the right word? I don't know if that's the right word or not, but I just something's weird about how all the female trains have lipstick. I know they're cartoon trains and that they could wear whatever they want, but I don't know. Something just feels off about the female trains. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, I do feel the narrator is also somewhat unnecessary, but that's probably since I'm older and all the videos in the series are marked for kids, so I'm probably not the target demographic for the series. And also, oh, okay, I was going to say something else, but I forgot what I was going to say. Oh my gosh. Uh, well, okay, I guess that's all my opinions about Rolling Stock then. Anyway, Fritz, what's your thoughts?
Something that I will say that makes me sad about this is that I really had high hopes in this one just because I really love Thomas the Tank Engine. It was such a letdown, so I'm sorry. It's a meh, maybe like 5 out of 10, I'm sorry, but I don't really like it. Thomas the Tank Engine is 10 times better.
Well, I suppose that's it. Well, you know what to do. Like and subscribe. And also subscribe to Fritz's channel as well. He makes animations and other stuff, so if you're interested in that, then go and take a look at his vids. Anyway, bye. See you in the next vid.